Dear CG thinkers, welcome! What are you doing in my video? You're not making donuts? I'm just kidding, don't go. By the way, if you don't feel like making round thing, it's alright, today it's square. Blender 4 is out and your companion Fluent has followed in version 3. So I thought it would be the perfect time to bring up you a new modeling tutorial. If you haven't yet downloaded Blender 4 and Fluent 3, well, hurry up, because we are not going to wait 100 years for you. It will be a damn shame to miss out a unique opportunity to model an incredible model. Grow your plants all over the galaxy. A model whose original idea is not mine, sorry, but I found on ArtStation. On your keyboards, on your mouses, here we go. CG South, share our knowledge, grow together. Just a note, I forgot, but the starter file is available for free, still at the same place. The link is in the description. Use the F key and then the Create button. Right-click on the floor to display the drawing grid. Draw a 6x2 rectangle and give it some thickness by moving the mouse horizontally. Left-click to bring up the menu and click on Offset to position the block on the floor. I then return to the block 8, setting it to the height of the character's heap. I continue the adjustment with a first bevel set at around 0.17. We continue with a second bevel set to a small value. Left-click to bring up the menu and click on the top icon to adjust only the upper part of the object. Here we are going to set something a little wider and straighter. You can use the menu or the C shortcut to modify the profile. That's all for now. Validate your second bevel and exit either by displaying the menu or right-clicking. We continue with the creation of the 3 columns in which you can grow your plants when you're away from your planet. Select the object already created and press the F key to request creation. Left-click on the surface of the block to display the grid. Left-click on the center point and hold down the Ctrl and Shift keys to draw a square from its center. Note that this time you don't validate with the left click but with the spacebar. Generally speaking, in Fluent, the use of the spacebar to validate a drawing refers to the validation of a line rather than a volume. If you had left-clicked to validate your drawing, you would have obtained a cube, but by using the spacebar, you obtain something like a wall. Anyway, you will soon understand. As for the height of this column, I'm going to specify a value. To do this, hold down the Shift key and press 1.8 and validate with the Enter key. Let's add a little thickness to this column with the thickness adjustment. This reminds me of a recurring problem. If you don't want to have a magnifying glass effect when rendering elements that are glass walls, do as you would in real life. Add thickness. Some might have been tempted to simply make a volume. So yes, why not? But when you add a glass tip material, you get a result that's not what you expected, precisely because you've created a volume and not a wall. It may sound silly, but to get a realistic result, you have to reproduce the real thing. We then add a first bevel, something quite fine. Finally, we will add an array to obtain 3 columns. For those new to this widget, first click on an axis to work on it. The basic setting is to adjust the spacing between repetitions. Press the C key to switch to adjusting the number of repeats. Left-click in the empty space to validate and exit the current axis adjustment. Click on the central button to validate and exit the array. Nothing further for these 3 columns. You can now exit with a right-click. With the columns in place, we are going to make a small adjustment so that the base fits more closely to the total width of the 3 columns. To get a better idea of what I'm doing in this case, I switch to top view by pressing the 7 key. I switch to edit mode and scale on the x-axis by pressing the S key and then the X key. For the upper part, I take the object used for the lower part and duplicate it using the Blender keyboard shortcut Shift G. I will also use the G and Z shortcut to move the object upward and the R, X 180 degree shortcut to flip it. So I'm deliberately going to place it a little higher up because I've got the idea of making the top part bigger than the bottom part. Once in place, I will edit it. Keep it selected and press the F key, then the edit button. Return to the first solidify to increase the height until you reach the columns. With the basic setup now complete, I continue and finalize by editing a bevel by selecting the objects and using the Add Bevel button. I then reduce the size of this bevel by dividing it by 2, again using the Pi menu on the If key. The basic shape is now in place and we can begin the first level of detail. A quick aside on the structure of this video. We are going to work layer by layer. It's an aspect of the work that's rarely explained, but in any creation you have to work in layers. Don't go into too much detail too quickly. I think us, content creators, are a little guilty of making you believe that the object was built with a high level of detail from the outset. I could have had you model the whole lower part with its final level of detail and then the upper part. But that would be lying to you about the creative process, which I feel is just as important as the technique. In short, be careful what you are shown, whether it's me or others. The videos are edited, the objects are planned in advance, and the whole thing can give you a biased view of the creative process. Anyway, back to modeling. Select the bottom part of the object, F, cut, and right-click on the side to display the grid and draw a rectangle, holding down Shift to center the drawing. Follow my example. The rectangle must extend beyond the block. Confirm with a left click, bring out the volume, and add a fairly wide first bevel around 0.13. Next, move the mouse to the left to set the second bevel to 0. Display the menu and click on the top button. Just like the basic block, we are going to add a wide straight bevel. Exit the add-on and switch to front view by pressing key 1 on the numeric keypad. Now it's time for a cutting session. The base is still selected. Cut, and this time left click outside of the object to start drawing. No need for a grid here. The rectangle should cover the entire object from left to right, like this. Validate with a left click, dig in by moving the mouse to the left and press V to cross the entire object. We have got a float bottom again, so remember this technique, it could be useful again. We continue with the slice. Press F, slice. The drawing is based on the same principle as before. Validate, start digging, and then V to cross the object. Let's stay in front view for the next slice. This time, let's use the shape tool. Left click to start drawing, then hold down Ctrl to use the snap. Once the shape has been reproduced, validate with Shift left click and cross the object. Call up the mirror tool to create symmetry. We finish with a first bevel to round off the corners. Last slice in front view, exactly the same principle. I will leave you to watch and reproduce. Don't forget that everything is adjustable. If you wish to modify your cut, don't delete it. Just modify it. Enter Edit Mode and move the vertices. Before making the last slice, I reduce the width of these objects a little. The last slice is on the side. I adjust the positioning of the Boolean object by increasing the first solidify and moving the offset to make sure I don't cut the part that comes out. We've got the lower part right. Now let's get on with the upper part. Stay in front view. Nothing special on the first three slices. Make a cut to obtain a thin plate at the top. For the second slice, use the shape design with the Ctrl key hold down. As for the lower part, add the first bevel to round the corners. Last rectangular slice, this time display the grid to fill the center. The next operation is an inset. Press F, then Inset, and display the grid to draw a rectangle. Give space on both sides by lengthening the object with first solidify, increase thickness, and shifting the offset. Display the adjustment menu where you will find an Inset Thickness button. Move the mouse horizontally until the cutout part stands out. Once you're satisfied, validate and add first bevel to round the corners. Note that when you're in Fluent, the Blender keyboard shortcuts for moving and rotating objects are always available. So I use the G and Z keys to adjust the positioning of the Boolean object. Personally, I find the cut a little high. So I enter Edit Mode with the Tab key and use the S and Z keys to reduce the height. Use the Tab key again to exit Edit Mode. The second to last slice is a simple square. When the grid is displayed, we can see that it extends over the entire height of the upper block. However, I only want to display the grid on the face I've clicked on. To do this, I deactivate the Extend option and right-click again on the face to refresh the grid. The grid is now only on the face we clicked on, and we can draw a square in its center. This cut will require only one adjustment, bringing up the menu and requesting a first bevel with a straight profile. At this point, I realize that the general bevel on all the objects in the upper part is a little too large. I must not have selected the upper part earlier when I change the bevel size. So I select all the objects, press the F key and click again on the Add a Bevel button, which updates the existing bevel with the size indicated in the menu. And since I haven't touched it since earlier, it's necessarily the same size as the lower part. Last slice before moving on to the next level of detail, and this time it's a circular slice. After requesting a slice and displaying the grid, I press the C key to draw a circle. Once the cut has been made, I use the mirror effect to have a copy of the cut right next to it. For those wondering why the widget is up there, you should know that it's positioned at the origin of the object that serves as a reference for the mirror. In other words, it's positioned on the object that serves as the center of symmetry for the operation. I think that the model needs a bit more resolution, so I press the F key and then go to Other Adjustments. This is where I will find the automatic resolution parameters for my model. I will change the minimum number of segments for my cylinders to 32, and I will increase the model resolution parameter to 32 as well. So, for those of you who are new to the add-on and might be wondering what we are up to here, to make a long story short, the add-on automatically manages the resolution of your cylinders and bevels so that all curvatures are made with segments of the same size. This ensures model consistency and saves us a lot of time. We are going to start by creating a small grid. Display the grid on this part of the model and drawing a circular cut. The only adjustment to be used here is the array adjustment. Click on the red button to activate the axis. Move the mouse to adjust the distance and then press the C key to adjust the number of repetitions. You can press the C key as many times as necessary to toggle between adjusting the number of repetitions and adjusting the distance between repetitions. Once you're satisfied, exit Fluent and display the Boolean objects using the keyboard shortcut you may have modified in the preferences. Otherwise, press the F key and use the Boolean visibility button at the top center of the circular menu. Select the cut you've just made and duplicate it using the keyboard shortcut Shift D and press the Z key to move down vertically. Keep the Boolean object selected and add this object to your selection by holding down the Shift key while clicking on it. Now press the F key to request a Boolean operation between the two objects. Continue editing by modifying the array, click on the red button and immediately press the C key to reduce the number of repetitions by 1 and readjust the spacing if necessary. Left-click in the empty space to validate what has been done on the axis, then click on the widget's central button to kit the adjustment. And here's how you can make that typical sci-fi cut. Let's continue with a very useful technique that I strongly advise to you to remember. Select this object, request a cut, and click on the Face Inset button. The object automatically switches to edit mode, and I invite you to select this face and press the I key to make an inset. Confirm with the Enter key and move your mouse a little to the left to cut. Hold down the Shift key and click on the pencil icon to continue working on the Boolean object we've just created. Return to the front view and press the S key or use the Shape button. Make a first click here, then hold down the Control key until you've finished. I invite you to reproduce the same pattern as I did until you're over halfway through the object. Now validate your design by pressing the spacebar. As mentioned earlier, the spacebar will validate the drawing as a line and not as a volume. Move the mouse to add depth to the line. Confirm the operation and use the thickness adjustment to add thickness to the line. For beauty's check, make the thickness of this path approximately the same as the thickness of the outline. Finally, add a mirror effect. As it happens, I was lucky enough that everything went well and I didn't have any artifacts. It's possible, even very likely, that you will have a result that isn't very pretty, but that's no problem. For the time being, I suggest you pretend there's no problem, as I'm going to show you later in the video how to solve artifact problems. I'm not going to do it here simply because, as far as I'm concerned, well, I haven't had any problem. So I'm not going to fix a problem I haven't got. Don't worry about it for now. You will come back to it later. Next, I will create a space for screen and buttons. Nothing special on the first two cuts. I will let you have a look and I will join you for the buttons. To create the buttons, I'm not going to use the Cut tool, but the Create tool. Display the grid and draw a circle. Adjust the thickness and offset so that the button rests on the surface. Display the adjustment menu and click on the plus to access the taper tool. The widget works in the same way as the array widget. Click on the blue button to transform the cylinder into a cone. Left click to confirm the operation on the current axis and confirm the global adjustment by clicking on the central button. Don't forget that you can change the diameter and height of the button at any time. We finish our buttons by editing an array. I think, or at least I hope, you've understood how to do this. First click on the red button and move the mouse to control the spacing, then use the C key to control the number of repetitions. In my example, I'm using 3 buttons, but you can do as you like. You can exit and use the F key menu to add a bevel. I now suggest that you make this little trapdoor. The starting point is simple. 2 successive rectangular cuts, for each of which I will simply add a first bevel. Select the last Boolean object created, press the F key, hold down the Shift key and click on the Duplicate Extract button. Add a small bevel as usual and we will now work on this object. It's a rectangular cut at the bottom. Note that this cut doesn't go all the way through the object. Use the taper tool to angle the sides. Click on the grid button, move the mouse and left click again to validate the axis, then click on the widget's central button to kit. I will continue with a circular slice that I will divert to make a small arrow pointing downwards. The trick is to reduce the resolution of the cylinder until you obtain a triangle. Then simply rotate by 90 degrees using the RZZ keys, then minus 90 typing. The last little element is the hatch fasteners. Use inset cuts. Make a small rectangle and don't cut the full depth. Then set the inset depth to a very small value. You can see that in my case I'm around 0.08. A little mirroring and you're good to go. I'm thinking that in the end I would prefer to see the little arrow as a cavity. So I decide to remove the inside of the triangle. I display the Boolean object, select the triangle and reduce its depth. Now that I've done that, I'm ready to move on. Finally, I invite you to add a few small rectangles using the slice function. It cuts nothing and always has an effect. We finished the lower part and won't be touching them again. Let's move on to the upper part. Let's start by simply drawing a rectangle on this part at first bevel until the shape is fully rounded. Use the rotation tool to rotate the shape by 45 degrees before editing a repeat effect with the array tool. Another simple addition is on this part. Make a rectangular shallow cut and use the circular array tool. Use the menu to set the radius and also the number of repetitions, which in this case is 4. In the menu, you will find an array rotation button, which allows you to rotate the entire cut and position it in the corners. Finally, you can see that I use the C key to rotate the rectangle on itself to obtain this result. We will now continue with the solid of revolution tool, which I don't feature much in my videos, but which can be used to create very interesting designs. It's also an opportunity to see if you have a good perception of space, a quality that's particularly interesting when working in 3D. Select this object, F, cut, right-click to display the grid and deactivate the extend option to display the grid on a single cylinder only. Now click on the revolver icon and right-click again on the grid center point. The grid will then rotate. Hold down the V key and move the mouse to increase the grid's resolution. In my example, I'm raising the resolution to 24. Please note that I start and end my drawing on the axis of rotation. If you don't yet know what I mean, just take a good look at what I'm doing on the screen and you will understand as soon as you validate. To place points, just left click as usual. I will let you follow what I've done. If you make a mistake, use the backspace key to delete the last point placed. Once the last point has been placed on the axis, press the spacebar to confirm. If, like me, you notice this strange thing on the edge, bring up the menu and click on the flip button. All that's left is to add a mirror effect to have the same thing next to it. Don't forget that everything is editable and that you can adjust your shape by displaying Boolean object, and by switching to edit mode, you will be able to access the vertices of the shape, and by moving them, you will be able to adjust the result. I'm repeating myself, but it's non-destructive. Then I have my little manic moment. I find that things aren't positioned or distributed properly, and I make a few adjustments. This is your opportunity to see that you can adjust everything at any time. The next part takes 2 minutes. 2 minutes during which you will learn a succession of manipulation that will make you a master. You're going to talk about cutting within the cut, like we did in the lower part and artifact correction. This is where I explain how to correct your artifacts if you have any at the bottom. This is the technique you will need to apply. So keep your eyes and ears wide open and let's get started. Make a first rectangular cut, then a cut in the back face of the first cut. For the second cut, do something quite deep. Hold down Shift and click on the button with the pencil to continue cutting the Boolean object we've just created. Display the grid and draw a thin rectangle from the center of the grid. Use the array tool to make 3 columns like this. This time, click on the button with the pencil without pressing a key to continue working on the current object. Right-clicking to display the grid, and this time make a horizontal rectangle. Use the rotation button to rotate your object by 30 degrees by clicking on this axis. Moving the mouse and then clicking in the empty space, and finally on the central button. Continue by editing a vertical array. As you can see, we are now creating a ventilation grid. You can see that the result is particularly horrible, and it's something you will find very often as soon as you do very close repetitions. If you look at the structure of your object, you will quickly realize that there are many overlapping edges. These edges have been added automatically by Blender, and your job is to add your own edges in the right places to that Blender doesn't have to add its own automatically. Display Boolean objects and select the Boolean object that made the first hole. I'm choosing this one because it's the one that made the back face, and it's this back face that I want to work on. Switch to edit mode and use the shortcut Ctrl-R to add edges, and use the mouse wheel to increase their number to 3. Click to validate. Keep your selection active and press the S and X key to adjust positioning. Last but not least, keep your new vertices selected and press the keyboard shortcut Shift F. You're now back in object mode, and look how much better is the result. We are slowly coming to the end of this tutorial, and I've got two more things to show you before we move on to the conclusion. The first is the creation of a handle, which I will use as a pretext to show you how to make a fake slice. After making your normal cut, click on the plus button and use the second solidify adjustment. In the menu of this tool, you will find a button called Fake Slice. Click on it and you will see that it does indeed look like you've made a slice, when in fact you don't have two objects but just one. Add a first bevel with a size of around 0.03 and that's it. Let's continue working on this part with a cut. For the next cut, we need to disable the extend option to display the grid only on the face we're interested in. This rectangular cut will use a first bevel and a second bevel. For the second bevel, use the menu to adjust only the bottom part. The goal is to obtain something very round. Like me, don't hesitate to adjust the position and size of objects. That's the advantage of working non-destructively. You can take the time afterwards to fine-tune dimensions and positioning. You will notice that I adjust dimensions in edit mode and not in object mode. I can't stress this enough, but it's generally not advisable in Blender to modify the size of your object in object mode. I won't go into the technical details, but just know that if you don't, you're going to run into a lot of problems. I will show you one last detail, and not the least, to add your model before leaving you with a few suggestions that I won't show you as this video is already long enough. Select the top of the bottom part and request a cut. Display the grid by right-clicking on the top face and drawing a square in the center while holding down Ctrl and Shift keys. Make a square that goes beyond the columns and confirm with a space key. Once you have added a little height, bring up the menu and add a little thickness. Continue by editing a first bevel to match to the column shape. Unless you have had a stroke of luck, it will probably be useful to adjust the size of the square so that it fits perfectly around the edge of the column. Once again, switch to edit mode using the tab key and reduce or increase the size of the square using the S key. Once you've got it right, press tab again to return to object mode and add an array to match the three columns. To have exactly the same thing at the top of the column, simply display the Boolean object, select the one you have just created, duplicate it using the Shift-D shortcut, and move it up using the G and Z shortcut. When in place, keep the object selected and hold down the Shift key, then click on the top part to add it to your selection. Press the F key and request a Boolean operation. The default is difference. Press the U key for a union Boolean operation. If you're still listening to me, well, bravo! You're one of those people who doesn't just skim the surface of the subject. And I congratulate you on that. You could add a few more details, which I will let you work out for yourself. For example, you could add these two indicators that I've added here I have also added these two cuts for a little more detail on the join. And finally, if you are feeling brave, you could try editing a LED above each column. In short, do yourself a favor and share your results with me on the Discord and on the social networks with the hashtag FluentB3D. If you're a beginner, I hope this has helped you to get the hang of it. For the other, I hope the idea of the model has interested you and that you will go further than what's proposed with a texturing phase and, why not, a nice rendering. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the video with the thumbs up and comments. And if you don't want to miss out on future videos, don't forget to subscribe. See you soon for new videos, and until then, don't forget, we get tired of everything except learning. Bye bye.